Welcome to today's session of Shine a Light on Innovative Practices, Data-Informed Library Advocacy. Excuse me, let's try that again. Welcome to today's Shine a Light on Innovative Practices webinar, Data-Informed Advocacy for School Libraries. I am very excited to introduce our presenter for today, Len Bryan, Partner of Library Services for Cherry Creek Schools. Len is in his 20th year of education with 11 in the classroom and 17 in the library and library administration. He has served as a librarian or library administrator in Texas, Oregon, and Colorado at the campus, district, and state levels. His library passions include enhancing instruction with library resources, data-informed library advocacy, and building partnerships across communities. And I can certainly speak to his love to data. We had the opportunity to work together in Denver Public Schools, and Len is an absolute data guru. I am so thrilled that he can be with us today to share this presentation that he originally presented at Hessel EdCon in June. If you're not familiar with Hessel EdCon, it's our state conference for school librarians, and this year it will be held on June 9th, 2026. So keep an eye out for that. And with all that, Len, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks so much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Susie, and for the opportunity to share one of my passions. And yeah, you said data guru, but I feel like I'm more of a data nerd. But that's okay. Labels are just labels. They don't mean anything. I do have a tiny URL link on the slide deck, and I know Susie will be sharing out the link and everything with everyone later on. Yeah, thanks for the great introduction, and let's like jump right in. Who am I? And and why should you care? I've been doing this for a very long time all over the country. I've really developed a bit of a specialty in turning around large scale library systems. My most recent gig was the director of library services in Houston ISD, which served 276 schools and almost 200,000 students. And I've done the work that Susie's doing for Colorado, I've done for the state of Texas. I'm a blogger for ASL Knowledge Quest, not as active as I'd like to be, but I'm trying to be better about that. I've also written a book, the Curate Shared Foundation, for ASL that supports our new and improved national school library standards. I like to think I'm a lifelong learner, and I was telling Susie before we came online that I learn more in giving these sessions than I think people learn from me. Definitely drop things in the chat and go off. And if you have questions or if you'd like me to go into any depth, any of those things. So, long story short, I've been doing this for a long time in lots of different places, and one of the constant um, themes and threads throughout all the library work that I've ever done, whether I was a middle school librarian, coordinator, director, whatever, has been the need to communicate our value to the people that make decisions, hold the purse strings, and decide how our library programs fit within the larger ecosystem that we serve. So, big point number one, the most important piece of library advocacy is the library staffer, the person who is in charge of the library. You're the face, you're the voice, and you're the heart of the library program. And every role that you undertake, I kind of come from a school library background, but it doesn't matter if you're an academic librarian, a public librarian, a special librarian, maybe in a law or a medical library. Every different role that you take, whether you're a digital citizenship instructor, technology troubleshooter, even when you're resetting a kid's password on a Chromebook for the 57th time this week, you're always the face and the voice and the heart of the library program. So, one of the big aha moments I had actually when I was in Oregon is that every role we undertake, whether even if we're serving as a crossing guard in the morning before school, we're the face of that library program. So, the long and short of it is everything we do is library advocacy. Every email we send, every conversation we have, every interaction we have with a student, with a staff member, with a with an administrator, with someone at the checkout line at the grocery store. I love to tell people what I do for work, mostly because I look the way I look, and I love to see the look on people's faces when they're like, "Really, you're a librarian? You're not a oil field worker, or you don't hang drywall for a living?" Like, no, I have a master's degree in library science and I get to do the best job in the universe. So, again, everything we do is library advocacy. Every role that we undertake, every communication we have is an opportunity for us to advocate for our library program. I'm going to drop some hard facts on you right now. If you're not a library person, you probably don't think about the library very much. I know this is hard to hear. I know that it can be emotionally triggering for some of us to learn that if you're not a librarian or you're not a frequent library user, even people just don't think about the library space. They think about us when they need the space for a photo op. I can't tell you how many videos my superintendent has produced or has been produced with my superintendent with the library as a backdrop, where when he talks with students or staff members, or this last week was Veterans Day, and when he was talking with veterans, it was always in a library because we make a great backdrop. We have books, we have, we're well organized. It looks great. So just get centered, catch your breath. It can be hard to hear sometimes that people just don't think or care about the library as much as we do. And that's okay, because one of the things that we can do as library staffers and librarians is help other people think about the library first, and not just when they need something, but think of it as a place where good things happen for our students. So to help people think about and care about our school library programs, we have to do something that for me as an introvert is very, very uncomfortable, which is get up away from my desk and go out and talk to people and learn about their needs, learn about what their goals are, what their aspirations are, what their priorities are. Um, it's very, I know I come across as an extrovert in when I present or when I visit with people, but really it's an act. It's a tool in my toolkit that helps me learn about the people who make choices about the library, learn about our learners, learn about their needs, learn about our teachers and what they need, and also just be a visible member of my community. A great example of this, one of our elementary schools has a fantastic program called Saturdays, where they open the library for 2 hours on a Saturday morning for families to come in and do a read aloud and do a craft and just be in the library space and be welcome. It's a Title I school, so they have their food pantries also open. They bring in a hairdresser and salon to have a little salon station for caregivers to get an update on their hair and their nails and stuff. And I was in there this a week ago. This is Highline Elementary in Cherry Creek Schools. Fantastic principal, fantastic media teacher. I was in there the other day and actually met one of our candidates for a school board election and got to have a great 15, 20-minute conversation with him about the importance of our library staff. But that opportunity would not have happened had I been at home watching football, which is what I wanted to do. But I knew that I needed to be present and visible in that space. And turns out he won the election. Now he's one of our sitting school board members, and he and I have a personal connection that, you can't beat that. Having those personal connections are super, super important. So we're really good at connecting people with resources. One of the things I want to encourage us to do is to make sure we're connecting ourselves with people and connecting people with each other. Our relationship is the most important thing school librarians can curate. So I want to bring your attention to an article that I read in School Library Journal way back in 2018. This is by Andrew Maxey and Mike Daria. It's linked in the presentation. But the article was titled How to Speak Administrator. And I'm going to drag that on the screen because there are some very important nuggets of wisdom that come from campus and district administrators around uncovering our potential and getting our light out from under that bushel. The first thing that they say is use data. They don't really agree with what data should be used for in public education, but data is the love language of administrators and decision makers. If you can speak using data, and we'll talk about quantitative data, which are the numbers and figures, and we'll talk about qualitative data as well. You need to become fluent in data literacy and using data. Another thing that they mention that's really important is check your vocabulary. If you're using terms like recreational reading and leisure reading, you are sabotaging the message. You are saying those things are optional, they're fun, they're fluffy, they're nice to have, but they're not essential for student learning. And at the end of the day, everything that we do is aimed at increasing student achievement. Leisure reading, recreational reading, we know how important they are, we know what they mean, but decision makers oftentimes don't. I really like the term academic reading practice. I like the term self-directed reading. Those types of things carry more weight and more gravitas than leisure reading or recreational reading, which can sound a little bit fluffy. When you approach your administrators, please don't bring a problem to them. They solve problems and put out fires all day long. As an administrator, I can tell you that's what I do 95% of the time. Come to them with a solution. Come to them with a way to help address something that's keeping them awake at night. Is it literacy? Here's a hint. It probably is literacy. How can the library increase student literacy? How can it increase academic performance? We know how to do that. We need to communicate that with our leadership. What about truancy? What about making kids want to come to school? At the secondary level where I was a school librarian, our students had to be there for algebra. They had to be there for English, had to be there for history. They wanted to come for football and for band and for CTE. And I wanted the library to be another one of those kid magnets that drew people into the space. You've got to get aligned with your school and your district plan and priorities. If you don't know what the greater organization's priorities are and goals are, you need to find out what that is. Don't talk about books. Don't talk about your schedule. Don't talk about your budget. Talk about students. Look at this picture on the screen. This is happy kid data. You want to see happy kids in the library. You want to see kids that are engaged, families that are engaged in the library space. Tell the library story through students and teachers. This means recruiting people, coaching them, giving them talking points about how the library has impacted them and their lives. Have teachers and students tell the story of the library. If you can, this is a tough thing to do because there's lots of studies out there that show having a librarian correlates to higher test scores and higher student achievement. Causation is a harder thing to prove, but it is possible to do, and we'll get into that in a little bit. They say share the ASL standards. I'll double down on that and tell you that sharing the HESL program is a huge way to bring attention to your program to help you evolve as a library professional and also help raise the visibility of the library program within your school. So far, these are the steps to success in data-informed library advocacy. So far, we've talked about realizing that everything we do is advocacy, right? Nobody cares as much as we do. It's okay. We're going to help them. We can help others care. And then we've learned a couple of tips for how to speak administrator. I cannot recommend that article enough. I have printed it out, I've highlighted it, I've annotated it, I've internalized a lot of that messaging, and it's really changed the way that I have conversations with administrators, whether I'm in a meeting with them or in the hallway or wherever that case may be. Next, we'll talk about data, the nerdy stuff that I really geek out about. We'll really get into the deep dive of the numbers and the qualitative and quantitative data. And I do want to draw a distinction. I mentioned this before. Qualitative data are happy kid data. It's pictures of kids using the library. It's pictures of kids engaged in books. It's also things like quotes. It's also things that teachers or caregivers or administrators say when they walk in the space. And I have an example of this. I was visiting one of our schools this morning, and the librarian has done a fantastic job of reorganizing the physical space. She has the reading rug next to the door. The everybody picture books are right next to that. The beginning chapter books are next to that. The fiction and nonfiction are just behind that. So there's a logical sequence of moving up in your reading levels and your reading capabilities and what opens up to you as you kind of move from the front of the space to the back of the space. And she's mentioned how much teachers have commented on this feels purposeful. It feels like it's planned. It feels like it's intentional. And those kind of quotes are things that I would want to capture. I'd want to say, hey, can you email me that? Or can I record you saying that real quick and just put it in my folder for me to use later on? So this presentation is mostly about quantitative data, the numbers, the charts, the graphs, and the infographics and stuff. But don't discount the power of qualitative data because you have to speak to the head with the numbers, but you also have to speak with the heart or speak to the heart with, again, pictures, stories, quotes, and experiences. So we have some low-hanging fruit in libraries. We have some things that most libraries collect or have access to. Things like circulation numbers, things like the age of your collection, things like the number of classes and lessons that you've taught or collaborated with. If you're in the public library space, what's your programming attendance look like? I love database statistics. I'm a big fan of that. We'll talk a lot about that because if you're campus level, if you're district level, if you're in a system, if you're in a co-op, databases can look and smell a little different, and how you get those statistics out of those can be a little bit different. I like to, when I was in DPS, one of the things that we did was we rebuilt our access points to all of our resources because I wanted to be able to capture and show how many hits each of those links got on our library website. If you have control of your library website and are able to apply analytics to that, Google Analytics is a popular one, but there's lots of other ways to do it. Just being able to show usage and show numbers. And website hits tend to be very, very high, big, impressive numbers. For some libraries, it could be well into the six figures, and those types of numbers show engagement and they show that eyeballs are on those resources. I'll share a couple tools for collection analysis. People counts are another one. If you have one of those antiquated library security systems, which I detest, by the way, they're visually terrible. Some of the features of those systems, even though I turn off the beeper when a book walks out, I'll keep the people counter on if it's on there. If you don't have a people counter, one of those systems, I've had that little handheld thumb thing, and I'll do an average. Like if I'm having a super busy morning, I'll count up the number of humans I have in the library, multiply it by five, and call it good. So counting the number of humans who come in and out of your space can be a wonderful metric that you can share out, especially at the secondary level. When visits are more random. When I was a high school librarian at the last school I was in, I would have between 80 to 120 students in my library before school. We had a single lunch, and I would have to cap it at about 200 because we were just maxed out with people. And then after school, I would have a smaller number, usually between 40 and 60 students, but that was on a pretty regular basis. But I would count up those kiddos, multiply by five, and that was my attendance in the library. And those numbers really start to add up over time. And I mentioned it before, the qualitative pictures and quotes. Anytime somebody sends you a nice email, anytime somebody leaves you a sticky note, drop that into a folder for use to in your annual report or anytime you have an opportunity to share the power and the impact of your library program. So I am a gigantic nerd, as I mentioned before. I collect all of my quantitative data into a single Google workbook that has multiple sheets. And you can see those. I just did a screenshot of the sheet across the bottom. I like to do comparisons from year to year. It shows growth and shows challenging areas of what we need to work on. I'll have our print circulation in one tab, our ebook circulation in another tab, our databases circulate, or our database searches in a tab. And we have a couple of tools that don't really generate statistics in the same way. Teaching books and Noodle tools, I'll get into those later. I'll have a tab for visualizations. I'll have a tab for database visualizations, and then my historical stuff. So I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on that, but I do want to drag the live workbook into view so that you can kind of see. My 3 year comparison has 23, 24, 24, 25, and this year to date. I've got our totals. This is just for print, and it's this difference tells me what I need to get to beat last year's. So I've kind of started to mark some of these in green when a school has already beaten last year's total. This is November. This is through the end of October. So for ebooks, I've already got schools that have beaten last year's circulation. You can bet I emailed that librarian and that principal about the work that they've been doing. Database hits are the same way. We're already beating last year's total in a lot of places. So the workbook is super, super detailed. It's got a lot going on. But
Len,
it's one of those things. Yeah, go
is
ahead.
it possible to change the window? We're not able to see the workbook
Oh,
live.
okay. Okay. That's okay. It's a lot.
Okay,
But there's a great deal of stuff in there. I'll make a copy and share that out. It is a public viewable workbook, so I'll share that in the chat. Actually, I can drop it in there right now. That way you can see that on it. If you're lucky enough to have another screen, you can do that. But you're
perfect.
welcome to view it. One of the things I like to do is I like to make our statistics visible to anyone who is curious and would want to see them. And one of the things I've told our campus library staff is there's no shame in our game. If you don't have great print checkouts, maybe you have a scheduling problem. Maybe you have an internal structure that's keeping you from having the print checkouts that a neighboring school has. Another thing that I do is when you get into the print tab, is I have per student numbers. We haven't gotten our official October enrollment yet, our snapshot day enrollment, but once we do, I'll put that in and we'll have a calculation per student so that my elementary schools that have 400 kids can be on par with my elementary school that has 700 kids. So we try to be equitable and fair in how we share and what we share. Another thing you'll see in the visualizations tab is graphs and charts. Um, one of the things I love about Google Sheets is it's super easy to create graphs and charts, but you have to be careful about rows and columns because that will populate your legend and it will show how your data appears on your spreadsheet and on your workbook. The another thing I love about Google Sheets specifically is the shareability of the graphs and charts. I can just copy the chart and paste it into a presentation like I did here. It's easy to grab screenshots. It's easy for me to isolate data and share that out with administrators, school board members, whoever wants to have a conversation about what our schools are doing. One tip I'll give you, and I am guilty of this, is I let my charts get way too busy. So this is the first visualization that I did of our print and ebook total circulation. If you look down the right-hand side, the legend is a mile long. And in the center of the chart, even though years are broken up with colors, it's still a lot of data all in one place. So when you're doing graphs and charts and when you're grabbing data for that, I do recommend isolating that data a little bit. So this is our ebook circulation. So just think about the type of story you can tell about this year's ebook checkouts in 25, 26 so far compared to the last 4 years that are shown there on the chart. So let me put the other chart back up. Ebooks here are at the bottom of the screen and they're barely a blip when compared to print checkouts. So if I really isolate that data, I can show a tremendous amount of growth. I also put data labels on this year's line, the maroon line, and left the others unlabeled because I want to draw attention to the growth and the explosive growth that we've had in Sora usage for our district. Part of that is due to the fact that we're curating centrally now for the entire district. We have a request form on our Sora website. I see Connie's here on the video, and she's been a huge help in helping us maximize the access points that we have for our ebook collection. So our growth in Sora has been huge, and this piece of advocacy helps me go to my leadership and go, hey, our kids and our teachers and our families are using our ebooks and our audiobooks and our digital magazines. Let's invest in that at an even higher level. And so far, I've been pretty lucky. I want to say I got a 25 or 30% increase in my Sora budget for this year versus last year. So every year, even with statewide budget cuts, we're getting a little bit more investment because I'm able to show this data. And I update it every month, and it's always up to date, and I'm able to grab this chart and share it at a moment's notice. This is our print circulation. I do like this data. I don't like the color combinations. It looks like pea soup, but I do like this data because it does show that even though we have some increases in print circulation, they're not nearly as dramatic as ebooks. And the reason for that is we have not yet invested in our print collection. Right now, schools are on their own for budgets. A lot of them are pulling books out of book fairs. They're getting donations. They're just not being able to do intensive collection development because the funds aren't there. So I use this data in contrast with my ebook data to show when we invest in our kids and our teachers with dollars, it pays dividends. Our ebook collection is far more up to date, far more culturally responsive, and far more responsive to the needs of our users than our print collection simply because we have the funds to do that. So think about telling stories with data. This is our historical circulation from 2020 through the end of October, which is the last month that I have data for. As you're looking at this, this is a stacked bar chart in Google Sheets. It's in the live sheet that you can see under district-wide visualizations. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see this. So what I did here is I'm comparing our print circulation to our ebook circulation with a total. We've had over 600,000 checkouts combined most of the last 5 years. 2020, we know why that wasn't great. But we've come back really hard. A couple things that you can probably spot as you're looking at this. This is all data literacy, right? From 21, 22, we've seen a decrease in print checkouts. Why do you think that might be? Every year, our collection gets older. Every year, our kids change, but our collection stays the same, right? We're not adding new books. We're not adding print books. We're not getting the newest, hottest, most engaging material for our kids, and our circulation is suffering because of that. And there are other reasons for that too. Staffing changes. Some of our libraries haven't been opened as much. Some of the time has been not allocated to libraries the way it has been before. But there's lots of different ways to slice and dice that data. At the same time, especially in the past school year, you can see the ebook share of our circulation has increased. We broke 100,000 for the first time last year in our ebook checkouts, and we're on pace to blow that out of the water this year. So our ebook, our overall circulation may continue to grow. We're rebounding up. You can see almost a C shape in that data. I anticipate 25, 26 to surpass 24, 25 in total, and hopefully with some investment of some dollars into our prints collections, we'll see that print circulation start to bump up. I'm really emphasizing that with our staff this year of getting books in kids' hands. Don't limit them. Let them check out a big stack of books before the holidays. All those strategies to help increase print circulation. So again, we're sharing data with our decision makers, but I'm also sharing it with our campus folks in the hopes that we're thinking about numbers. We're thinking about how do we get more kids engaged in books and reading and literacy. This is a generic shared calendar. Don't look too closely at it because this is like an orthodontist calendar, like screenshot. The reason for that is I don't have a shared calendar anymore. I'm kind of scared. I'm kind of sad. But I used to have, when I was a high school librarian, I had separate calendars for separate teaching spaces in the library. We had a two-story library. The upstairs was just a large meeting room that could be broken up into four classrooms. We had a green screen studio. We had my teaching area downstairs and with the tables and stuff in the library. We had a little computer station. We had all that stuff. So I made a calendar for each one. And the reason I did that was I wanted, when teachers wanted to schedule a space, I gave them access to the calendar. They could schedule themselves. They never did. They always just emailed me and I scheduled them. But at the end of the month, I was able to grab a screenshot of my calendar. I could count how many sessions we had. Our average class size was 26. Multiply it by 26. Boom, that's how many kids we had in our library for the month of October, what have you. So if you have a space that is used, that is busy, you want to find a way, I mentioned the people counter. You may want to find a way to capture that in a calendar or in some, or even a planner or a journal or a notepad, whatever works best for you. Capture the work that is going on, even if you're not teaching those classes. My upstairs classrooms that I had in Houston were by far the nicest classrooms in the whole building. They had renovated the school, but only the library and the cafeteria. They were waiting for the next bond to do the classrooms. So teachers clamored for that space. They wanted to bring their kids in there because they could spread them out. They had all the cool digital tools and stuff. But I was like, hey, I have to manage that. I have to keep it clean. I have to bring supplies. I have to troubleshoot the technology. So even if I'm not co-teaching in that space on an information literacy lesson, I still want credit for the teachers and kids being in the library because they're going to walk past a book display. They're going to be exposed to puzzles and games and makerspace and the 3D printers that we're always running. There's opportunity there. So I want to capture that and be able to share that as well. It's not, the message is not, look how busy I am. The message is, look how impactful our library program is to our school and our school community. One of the things I do internally as a district coordinator is I use conditional formatting, and you'll see it in the live workbook, but you'll also see it here on the screen capture. It helps me celebrate those schools that are doing fantastic job of moving books, of getting books in kids' hands. It also helps me spot patterns of non-use, disuse, or ending use. Some of my schools lost a staff member. The person may have gone on. I have one school that went, my library tech went on medical leave and didn't come back. She was like, I can't continue in this role. If I didn't have the statistics to help me spot that, the schools don't communicate with me. I have to reach out to them and go, hey, I noticed we had no checkouts last month. What's going on with our friend that's in the library? And sometimes the office manager will be like, oh yeah, she went on leave last week. Thanks for the heads up. Thanks for letting me know. Let me know how I can support you. So I used conditional formatting to help me again celebrate the schools that are just doing a fantastic job and also look for patterns. And this is great too because I can break this out by executive director. These are the folks in our district who supervise the principals, and I can take it to them and go, look, two of your schools don't have very good circulation. How can we work together to do a better job of getting kids in the library? I use conditional formatting over time, again, to show growth in checkouts, growth in database usage, growth in ebook or audiobook usage over time. And again, this is to celebrate the efforts of the staff members. One of the things I always tell our campus library folks is any wins that we have with numbers are due to you and the efforts that you're putting into educating our students and our teachers and our families about the resources that we have. So conditional formatting is very easy to do. You highlight a group of cells in your spreadsheet, go to format, select conditional formatting, set your upper and lower range. I like to use 0 and max, and then set a mid range. I use red, yellow, green. You can use your school colors, whatever you like. If you're a campus person or a single site person, you could put your teachers on here, run reports to show checkouts by homeroom, and now you know who your high level teachers are. You probably intuitively know, But your gut tells you one thing, the facts tell you something else. And the facts are something you can take to your principal and go, hey, I need the fourth grade to be in here more often because they're missing a lot of checkout and it's showing in the amount of books that those kids have access to. So there's ways to apply this, even if you're not at the district level. I support 68 schools. You probably don't have that many, but this helps me keep track because I have a lot of moving pieces. This is more for my internal use, but I can break this out for our leadership to see as well. Okay, databases. These are the district-wide electronic resources that we provide to all of the schools in our district, depending on their level. There's a lot, and every one of them has a little bit different way of collecting and reporting and sharing usage statistics. Some I can go into an admin console and pull statistics whenever I need to. Shout out to Overdrive because that's the easiest one. I can see statistics by grade level, by school, by just any way I want to slice and dice the data, I can do that. Some of the others are a little bit, it's more like pulling teeth to get those out. But one of the things that I tried to do was find a common denominator in our databases. So for our PebbleGo, our Britannica, our EBSCO, and our Gale, I use searches. The reason I use searches is because people understand what a search is. They don't understand a full text retrieval. They don't understand a session necessarily. And searches are usually a big, gaudy, huge number. And the sessions and retrievals are not usually quite as big, but people understand what that is. The way I communicate the power of our databases and our electronic resources is every search done in a database is a search that's not done on Google or on AI. We're accessing academic, ad-free, curated content that's specifically put together for our students. Gets them ready for college, gets them ready for career, all the good things that happen when we use databases. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but this is the messaging that I take to our administrators as well. So wrangling all these tools is a bit of a nightmare. I have them pulled into into the workbook that I shared with you guys. For databases, for searches, I use PebbleGo and PebbleGo Next at the elementary level. The reason I use those databases is because we provide those at the district for all of our schools. Each of our schools are free to select additional products and resources that are right for them, but I only count the stuff that comes from the district level. Why? Because it's equitable. I don't want to count a school that has 13 databases against a school that only has two. That's just not fair. And then usually that's a funding, that's a funding priority. At the secondary level, it's Gale. Just because all of our middle schools and high schools have access to Gale, they all have Gale products. So again, we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. Teaching books, Noodle Tools, and Swank, EBSCO, all those have different metrics that they use, and those are ones that, again, I mentioned with Sora, especially we use checkouts, which are very comparable to print checkouts. So again, we get a lot of different data from a lot of different places. If you're at the campus level, you may not have insight into the types of usage that your school has in these different databases just because of the way the database was purchased and configured for your building. If you get a database through a consortium, it may not be possible to tease out your individual buildings' usage. I highly recommend talking to your rep. They can help you slice and dice and tell you what's possible, what's not really possible with the way it's currently configured. I've worked closely with reps from all these different companies, and they've been fantastic to help me get my head around what's our actual usage. Our next step is to look at some of our other systems and electronic resources that aren't library necessarily, because I'm all about if we're not using it, we don't need to keep funding it. I need to see hard numbers on what's actually getting used in our district because, your feelings are one thing, but facts are quite a different thing. So again, wrangling these can be a lot of work. I've been doing it for a while, so I've gotten pretty good at it, but I highly recommend reaching out to your vendors to see what's available. If they have an admin console, how do I get access to that? Or maybe could I just get a spreadsheet emailed to me once a month or once a semester or once at the end of the year, just with a recap of how we're using these resources. I do want to give a shout out also to Follett. The tidal wave and tidal wise analysis is a fantastic tool that is highly customizable. You can put in your enrollment, you can put in your goals, like how old do you want your collection to be, how big, how many books per student, all those things. And it gives you these wonderful clickable charts that you can dig into as a data nerd. The tidal wise analysis is very it's by far my favorite. There are several out there that do something similar, but this one for being dynamic and clickable is really helpful to know your print and if your digital is cataloged, your the entire state of your collection. So you can see on the screen, it'll tell you how many items you have, average age, items per student. You can set the goal for that to be whatever you want it to be. Your percent of print versus digital, fiction versus nonfiction. The second page of that is even more powerful. Whoops, I clicked into it instead of scrolling the slide. There we go. The second page, as you scroll down, is even better because this is broken out by Dewey area. The zeros through the 900s, it tells you the average age, it tells you how many books you have. If I click on this list of 80, I'll go straight to that list of 80 items. And it'll tell me exactly what items I have in that collection with the average age of 2012. You can also look at it by year. So, what books do I have that are published in the 70s or older? If you click on that blue hyperlink, it'll give you a list of what books were published in the 70s or older. Some of them might be fine, but if you have a book on the space program published in the 70s, you might have a problem. It might be a little bit out of date. So, this gives you great insight into your collection. You can also look at classifications, fiction, reference, biography, story collection, professional, paperback, easy. They still call it easy. I don't like that term. It's everybody. Picture books are for everybody. They're not easy. Some are very complex, but they still call it that. That's fine. I'm not mad at them. You can also look at collection by interest level. This is for an elementary school, so I would expect to see a lot at K through 3 and 3 through 8 or 3 through 6. Hopefully, I'm not seeing a ton of YA at the elementary level, but I will tell you some classics are classified as YA, so it's not necessarily YA. Oh my gosh, no reason to panic. Just click on the list and see what you have. Okay, so far, I've talked a lot. My voice hurts, but that's okay. We're in this together. So far, we've talked about our role in advocacy, right? Learning to speak administrator. I've kind of shared a little bit with you around different types of data and different ways that you might think about using them. We talked about the low-hanging fruit, the data sources that are available to us or might be available to us if you want to reach out to your vendors. I've talked a little bit about collecting and formatting your data. Talked about databases, the wrangling chickens that databases can be. It's a lot. And then we talked a little bit about TitleWise data for collection development. The last section for me is the most powerful section for practitioners, whether you're at the district level, building level. Again, if you're a public librarian, if you're an academic librarian, once we have our head wrapped around the numbers, both for the quantitative side or the qualitative side, how do I improve the output? How do I make those numbers more impressive? How do I make those stories and quotes and pictures that I take of my programs or my author visits or my lessons? How do I make that more impactful and more powerful? Then we'll talk about lots of different ways to present the data, and then just a couple of tools and tips here at the end. I am watching the chat. Susie's on it. She's stopping me if we need to. But feel free to
All
chime
good.
in if you have comments or questions or anything like that, because we are ahead of schedule. I love it. The first thing I'll tell you to improve your data and prove that it matters is to get yourself involved in the Hessel program. This has been a game changer, and I can tell you, I've worked in 3 states. I've done this work in 3 states, and Colorado's the only one that has that I've worked in that has a program like this. This is a highly impactful set of tools that can help you improve all aspects of your program. Whether you are a teacher librarian, a library paraprofessional, or even a principal, there's a Hessel program for you. And I encourage you to work through those credentials and work on getting a school designation, which is once you've done all the credentials. It's really, really helpful because it helps you be a strategic thinker and think ahead, which goes back to data collection and database advocacy. As you're thinking about a lesson, an activity, a program, if you're going to go out and select a resource to add to your catalog, to add to your school, you think about how you're going to measure that. What data is available to you about, let's take a database, for example. One of the first questions I ask vendors when they want to pitch me a database or pitch me a product of some type is like, how am I going to know this is working? What data can you provide me? How do I get the data? Do I have to go in and log into an admin console and pull it out? Are you going to email me a report? What data do you provide? Are you counter compliant? You know, counter is the data standard for electronic resources. Most database vendors that are reputable are counter compliant. I'm not even sure what version they're up to now. It used to be 4, it may be 7 by now. I don't know. But compliance with the data standardization is really important. If it's a lesson, if it's an activity, if I have a makerspace in my library, how am I going to track how many kids use my makerspace? How am I going to track what the impact of that makerspace is on the achievement and learning of my students? Is it going to be qualitative? Am I going to take pictures? Am I going to get quotes from kids? Am I going to have a showcase of the creations that they build in the makerspace? How am I going to show that having this busy work, which makerspaces can sometimes evolve into just a giant mess and busy work, how can I show and prove that that matters to the lives of our kids, to the lives of our teachers, and to our community? So, as I'm thinking about implementing something, I also want to give a little bit of thought to how am I going to capture this? How am I going to capture that impact and that input and make that visible to the decision makers that hold the purse strings, that determine my schedule, that determine my staffing, and all that stuff. So it's really important as you're planning an event, as you're planning a program, lesson, as you're thinking about acquiring a resource, how am I going to measure that impact and do the HESL program? Cannot recommend that highly enough. So the elephant in the room is standardized testing, is the fact that most school districts live and breathe and die by the numbers. And one of the things that I can tell you is that it's very challenging to show direct causation of a library program into student achievement and test scores. But I have a couple of ideas. If you're working at the campus level and you're a school librarian, run a report of your top readers. Who checks out the most books? Would it be possible to lay that number alongside your test scores? There may not be anything there, but I would hazard a guess that kids who read more tend to do better on standardized tests. Even if they've read Diary of a Wimpy Kid 500 times since kindergarten, they are exposed to text, they're exposed to visual communication, they're exposed to media at a very high rate, and there's nothing wrong with rereading a favorite. How can we connect that to students' achievement? There may not be anything there, but you won't know until you look. Can you correlate or can you show a direct link between the number of or the types of teachers or the names of teachers that you've collaborated with to co-teach a lesson, that you've pushed in to do information literacy, data literacy, media literacy, digital citizenship? What do their test scores look like compared to other classrooms? If you have access to that data, great. If you don't, ask for access to that data or ask someone in your district or your school who might have access to that data. Hey, can I get a report for this? I want to look at something. Most of the time, they're happy to share that with you because we're educators and we have a legitimate need to know. Those are a couple things that you could do. Another thing that I like to try to do is, again, look at the reading numbers, look at the circulation numbers in a grade level in a classroom. One of the trends that I've noticed at the elementary level, for example, is K through 3 tend to check out tons of books. They're super excited, they're super engaged. Once they hit third grade, about middle of the year, it starts to drop toward fourth and fifth grade. What happens in Colorado in third grade? The pressure goes up, the testing goes up, the teaching to the test. Even though we don't teach the test in our state, we teach the test. Even though the skill drilling ramps up, one of the things that we need, one of the pressures we need to apply to our administrators and to our teachers and to our communities is yes, testing matters. Testing is important. Testing is how our schools and our districts are measured. We're accountable for those scores, and we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can still have our kids reading for academic practice, for self-directed reading, exposing kids to nonfiction, especially at that later elementary age, can spark curiosity that can carry them through high school. So again, that's the elephant in the room. We have to address standardized testing because it is a reality, and that's what we all have to wrestle with in school libraries. If you're a public and academic library, you have your own outside forces that are limiting people's access. So those are all things to think about as well.
Lynn, I was thinking
Yes.
too, just
Yeah.
about the impact of chronic absenteeism on test scores, and even thinking about school library access as an intervention and
Hmm.
potentially serving students, especially the most vulnerable, those who tend to be the most absent,
Yeah.
about how the school library impacts them, and even using as a test case, increasing their access to the school library and how that impacts their attendance.
What a fantastic idea. And I'm thinking too, there's nothing wrong with a little experimental design of having a group, a control group and an experimental group. Hey, let's give these kids access to the library before school. At the elementary level, it's really hard because they have to be supervised really closely all day long. And their schedules are usually pretty tightly controlled. But what about times when they're not? Can we give them access to the library during lunch? Can we give them an option to come to the library after school to wait for parent pickup instead of going to an aftercare program or going to something that maybe has a less of an academic bent, right? So there's lots of ways to do that. So ooh, I love the idea. At the secondary level, it's much easier. We can grab kids out of class. We can make the library available to them. They're sometimes more self-determinant in what their day looks like outside of class time. So at the secondary level, I feel like it's easier, but there are options at the elementary level as well. What do we do to create that warm, nurturing, inviting space and that welcoming environment that it's not about what you can't do, it's about what you can do in the library. I mentioned makerspace. There's also cozy furniture. There's also obviously the books that kids want and the books that kids love. I'm a big believer in give them what they want within reason, but have those available, lots of copies available, so there's no stigma attached to it as well. I love that. Thank you.
And
See,
just
yeah,
and more access to that third space with the relationship with the school librarian.
yeah,
Someone who is not grading them, someone
yeah.
who's often in that role because they want to have a different kind of relationship with students.
No doubt. I saw such a huge shift when I left the classroom and went to the library. And I did this at the same school where I had been teaching for years. So I knew the kids, I knew the parents, I knew the teachers, I knew the administrators and stuff. But my relationship with students changed so much when I no longer had that power of the pen of, being able to grade their papers and assign homework and stuff. That the librarian relationship is special. And being able to emphasize that and that impact of, we always talk about do you have one adult who cares and who smiles and talks to you? In our district, we really address, our bus drivers and our food service workers and our custodial staff, and I always throw in library staff too. We're not the classroom teacher, but we have a similar impact on kids. I love that. Yeah, there's so much to this that's outside of just spreadsheets and numbers and nerd things and figures that can really make a difference for the way kids experience school. All righty. Let's talk about the annual library report. I am not the expert on this, but I will give you a couple of pro tips. Don't give your annual report in May. Why, Lynn? Budget decisions are made in January and February. They are not made in May. That horse has left the barn by the time the annual report rolls across your principal's desk, or in my case, your superintendent's desk. I am getting ready after Thanksgiving break. I'm going to be sitting down and cranking out our library's annual report for the 2025 year. I'm going to put that on my superintendent, my assistant superintendent's desk when we come back from winter break because I want them to see happy kid data, big fat numbers that are super impressive. So think about your timing. It's okay to give a report at the end of the school year in May. It's totally fine to do that, but don't miss the chance to put happy kid feelings in your principal and your decision makers' minds before and as they're starting to make those budget decisions. We're already starting to have budget conversations in our district right now at the district level. Campus level, probably not yet, but at the district level, I'm already having to think about how do I justify my expenses? How do I ask for more strategically, knowing, the K-12 funding nightmare that is Colorado? How do I position our library program as important? Okay,
So site
yeah, go
level
go for
folks,
it.
then would you recommend for their library report, if they're creating one in December,
hmm
that they only include data from this current school year or they capture from the prior spring? How would
I
you?
yeah, I would like to put this out there and there's no special sauce or perfect way to do this. Because if you're just now thinking about data, it may be too late to get something together for this January. But librarians play the long game. Think ahead to next January. What I would recommend doing is comparing this fall to last fall so that
Okay.
you have an apples and apples comparison. If you have access to that information, and most of that stuff is stored within your circulation system or your databases system. You can usually get historical data and go backward. That's what I did when I got to Cherry Creek last year is I went backward and grabbed that data and threw it into my handy dandy workbook to have that peek backward. But I would definitely compare apples and apples. Compare if you're going to do fall of 25, compare it to fall of 24, fall of 23, fall of 22. It really depends on the numbers and what the story you could possibly tell with those. It really depends on how your decision makers like to see the data, and we're going to talk about that with Jennifer's blog post here on the annual library report. Your audience really matters. What kind of information do they want to know? So I don't know if I would go last spring and this fall in my December, January report, just because that's a different group of human beings. Your fifth grade, if you're elementary, your fifth graders are gone, you've got a new crop of kindergartners, it can be a little bit disjointed. So I think it would really depend on what data you have available, how far back you can go, and then what big strides have you made, and what do you want to highlight? If you want to highlight print, ebooks, databases, that may be all you need to present at this point. Especially if and I'm always thinking advocacy. What do I need more of? Right now, our electronic is really good. I need more print. So I'm really going to focus on print. So I'm going to focus on print circulation. And comparing apples to apples is really important.
And Jenna
Great
commented in the
question.
chat that
Yeah.
she found the results actually meeting with her principals quarterly to
Yeah.
give up.
And that's great. If you can get FaceTime with your administration that frequently, that's fantastic. That's so great. If you're able to set a monthly or quarterly cadence where you give updates on the most recent programs, the most recent instruction, most recent usage, that's fantastic. I find that administrators are not as accessible on that regular cadence in some cases, but if you have one that can meet with you that often, that's even better than trying to do a one-shot report. In Jennifer's blog post that I have here, I pulled together her headings from that post and a quote and these are all from Jennifer Lagarde, who is my hero. If you don't know The Adventures of Library Girl, open a Control T, open a tab, and check her out because she is amazing. She's one of my library heroes. The first thing that she recommends we do is identify the target audience. Who am I going to share my data, my qualitative, my quantitative data with, and what do they like? One of the first things I ask my boss when I take a new job, and I've had a lot of them, is how do you want me to communicate with you? Do you want charts? Do you want graphs? Do you want stories? Do you want pictures? Do you want an email update every week? Do you want us to get together every 2 weeks and talk? I really try to feel them out and see what they like. Another tip I'll give you is find out how they share to their bosses. Everybody has a boss. Find out how they share to their bosses and replicate that style to the best of your ability. If they use infographics, then you use infographics. If they use a narrative report that's text-based, use that. If they use charts and graphs, use that. You want to try to sync with their style as much as you possibly can. Um, and Jennifer's quote is great. The librarians I work with recognize that a good annual report is as much about the audience as it is about the person writing it. I love charts and graphs and spreadsheets. My previous supervisor here in Cherry Creek did not. She was like, numbers are great, but they mean nothing to me. Tell me a story. So I would take the data, tell her a story. My current supervisor here in Cherry Creek loves a good spreadsheet. So I shared this with him and I told him go nuts. So it really depends on who you're sharing with. Her second point is one that we made earlier that we heard from Mike Daria and Andy Maxey. Student data is the only data that matters. They don't want to hear about budgets. They don't want to hear about number of books. They don't want to hear about those things in isolation. They want to hear about how those numbers impact student and student learning. Everything we do has to go back to the students, or it simply doesn't matter. One of the things that the SLJ article said, we love our students individually, but we make decisions about them in large groups, and that's where having student data correlated to library data is so important. Jennifer also says to tell a story. Stories are primal; they connect us. When you're able to weave a narrative, using the numbers, using the qualitative data that you have, you're able to tug on people's heartstrings as well as appeal to their intellect. Diversifying the data that you share is really important. The data that I collect is kind of the obvious stuff, circulation, uh, ebook checkouts, and then database statistics. But I want to have a diversity in the data because my student body is diverse and people access literature in different ways. So how do I share that? It's not just numbers. It's also kids. It's caregivers. It's family. It's teachers. It's staff members. So when I go in to meet with my boss or I go in to meet with our leadership council, the things that I tell them are a mix of charts and graphs and stories about this professional learning event that we had, or this teacher who reached out with a need and we were able to satisfy that need with something that we already have in our district library. Here's the big tip: start early. It is November 18th, 2025. If you have not collected data yet, start now. You will have some data for the end of the school year. As I said before, you may not be able to do anything this January, but we're really good at thinking strategically and long term. Start thinking ahead now to what you want to present and how you want to capture the impact of your program, and just start working on it now. Just create a system that works for you. I love a good spreadsheet. Some people want a folder on your desktop. Some people have a physical folder in their library where they'll slip in post-it notes and things from students and artifacts. There's no wrong way to do it. The only wrong thing to do is not do it. So however you collect data works for you. Um, Jennifer's next piece of advice is less is more. Whatever you share with your decision makers, with your community, with your administration, try to make it as concise as possible. They're very busy and nobody's going to read a 20-page report about the library program. Remember, they don't think about us. They don't care about us until they need something from us. So we don't want to monopolize their time and we don't want it ever to be about us. We want it to be about the kids. Do the work. Let your report act as a mirror that reflects the great work. A great report, a shiny infographic, a wonderful Canva template is not going to do any good if you don't have the data to back it up. And the data comes from the work that you do. So you got to put in the work, you got to move books, you got to get people into our databases, you got to get people in the door, and then measure that and report that out. And finally, and I've got a bunch of links here at the end. Take the time to look at what other people have created and learn from them, and don't reinvent the wheel. You know, our profession is already isolated enough. You're not in this alone. You don't have to figure out all this stuff by yourself. I'll share my Blue Sky, my Gmail at the end. Feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to work with you on that. But it is really important that we reach out and support each other in this work, because when your library succeeds, my library succeeds. You know, it's an ecosystem, and we all rely on each other as well. So this is our district library infographic for last year. Again, this is the 2024-25 school year by the number. What I decided to do here was I decided to just take the figures, find a icon from the Noun Project, which I highly recommend. Noun Project gives you great icons that you can use to represent different things. And again, I try to use big old gaudy numbers. We almost broke 1 million database searches last year. In a district of 53,000 students, that's pretty good. Ebooks, 100,000. We broke that for the first time in history. We set 2 records in Sora last year for daily checkouts. One in March, and I think the next one was like 2 weeks later in April. District staff collaborations. This is every time I talk to another human being, exchange more than an email back and forth, had a meeting, had a PD. I wanted to show our administrators that I'm out and about in our schools working with our teachers and our principals all the time. So again, this is very simple. I like it because it's very clean, it's very simple. It doesn't have a lot of numbers on there, but the numbers that are on there, I'm able to tell a story about each one of those. We're running low on time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. So my friend James Allen, who is Susie's counterpart in Kentucky, has shared a fantastic infographic templates. This one is for Adobe Express. A lot of schools and districts have access to Adobe Express, and this is where I kind of borrowed and stole the ideas for the infographic that I just shared with you. He uses icons, he uses numbers. I highly encourage school colors if you're at a campus, district official colors if you're at a district. I don't love the colors here, but these are our district communication department's official, like, branded colors. I don't love them personally. I wouldn't pick this, but I want to show that we're part of the district team and we're supporting our district's kids. So he does that with Adobe Express. He also has similar templates in Canva. So if you're a Canva person, not an Adobe person, fine, no problem. James has got you covered. He's an amazing friend and he's a great collaborator, and he's built these for you. You can take them, customize them, and put your own numbers in there. In terms of presenting data, Arlington ISD Library Services had a great infographic that was kind of a long version. I have it linked here. They did a great job of mixing the qualitative and the quantitative. They have happy kid pictures right alongside the numbers, and I think that tells a powerful story. Heather Moorfield Lang has a curated list that's linked here. Those are secondary libraries, middle school and high school. There's also a great article in library, I think it's Library Journal, on the use of color in charts and the impact, the emotional impact that colors can make a person feel. So be thoughtful in your design. Try to create a unified design. Try to create a design that's less busy. We talked about that a little bit with charts. And remember, keep it short, keep it brief, and keep it targeted to your audience. Jamie Jensen had the most amazing, this is Twitter, the old Twitter X, not to be named anymore, garbage hell, site that's out there. But she took a stack of books, and if you read her post, it says we'll reach 30,000 checkouts this school year in a few short days. This is in March of 2023. On average, that's about 37 and a half books per student. So to give you a visual of what that looks like, this is a stack of 38 books. Now imagine this stack of books 800 times, one stack on average for each student. These are everybody books, they're picture books, they're short. I mean, they're thin. Imagine doing this at a high school with those big, thick brick Harry Potters and Twilights and some of those big monstrous books that we have. Some of those books stacks may be as tall as your students. How cool would it be to have a student with a stack of every book they've read that school year in the library? Big smile on their face. So social media can be a fantastic data platform. A single picture or video can be worth thousands of words, and this is one way to take a number and make it real and make it tangible and make it something that people can really get excited about. Jennifer, again, my library superhero. I have linked here a Google Sheet from Jennifer that has a ton of annual reports and other resources that have been crowdsourced from librarians all over the country. Again, you're not in this alone, and there are so many examples of great storytelling and great data collection and presentation that are out there. I encourage you to peruse that, take a look, reach out with questions. Please ask for help if you get stuck or if you're not even sure where to start or you have data and I'm sure I don't know what to do with it. I'm at your disposal. Susie is a fantastic resource for our state, and I encourage you to keep her as busy as humanly possible. I'm throwing you right under the bus, Susie. Um,
I'll take it.
but this, so to kind of wrap up a little bit, we've talked about all these just different aspects, some in more detail than others. But the thing that I want to kind of leave you with as we kind of wrap up is data is the love language of our decision makers. They look at and use and take action based on data on the daily, every day, all day long. We need to be able to become fluent in that language. We need to be able to target the messaging and the stories that we tell using both quantitative and qualitative data. I've given you a handful of ideas and some tips and things that have worked for me personally, but I am not by far the expert on this. It's just something that I've had some success with, and I want to encourage you to look at each aspect of what we talked about today and think about how to apply it in your own library. And again, reach out if you have questions. You can find me on Blue Sky. I don't do the Twitter anymore because dumpster fire, but you can find me on Blue Sky. My Gmail, librarianlynn@gmail.com. Link to the slide deck is here if you want to review the slide deck. And feel free to reach out. Honestly, I'm not just making that up. I'm more than happy to collaborate with our colleagues, and I know Susie is one of the best collaborators I've ever worked with, and I've been doing this for a long time. So again, I appreciate everybody's time and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Len. So much good information. I have like all these little post-it notes of ideas, and I really needed a bigger post-it note stack of this.
Yeah.
I'm super grateful for your time, and I know everyone who has the chance to either attend live or watch the recording is just going to walk away with so many great ideas. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Susie. I
Yeah,
appreciate the
thanks everyone for
opportunity.
joining us.